ordinance for the County of Missoula, State of Montana is now in session. The Honorable Amy Rubin presiding.
Welcome to the Parenting Plan Orientation class. So I want to thank you for attending and also thank the representatives from different agencies who are going to be presenting to you tonight. The idea on the Parenting Plan Orientation class is just so everybody understands how the court system works, especially if you're representing yourself, and to hear from agencies that are going to help you and help your children through the process. So my name is Amy Rubin. I'm a standing master. There are 4 district court judges and 2 standing masters in Missoula. The judges have decided that it's really important for people to hear from the judges ahead of time so you understand what the judge's perspective is and how we really want to focus on your kids and what's best for your kids. Our main speaker is a psychologist, and that person speaks from 5 to 6 p.m. They're going to focus on the effects that your behaviors might be having on your children and how conflict between the parents can really be damaging to children. A lot of times we're doing things that we wish we weren't doing in this very difficult period. And there can be a really significant impact on children, and you might not even be aware of what you're doing and how it's impacting the kids. We all have a booklet called Putting Your Kids First, and that booklet has a pretty good outline of what the judges are asking parents to focus on. Some of the things I want to talk about are how, when you have a case pending in the court system, that you need to understand how the court system works, especially if you're representing yourself. When the case is started, there's a petition filed. If there's no response, then the court will proceed to issue a final order. But if there is a response filed, then you have a contested case, and then you are in the system, and you're going to have to go through a certain process. Anytime that you have questions about that process, the Self-Help Center can answer some of those questions, and we have somebody from the center who's going to talk a little bit tonight. And the Self-Help Center may be someplace you've already visited. It's here in the courthouse, and it's on page 28 of your packet. But anytime a motion is filed, you're going to need to file an answer in 14 days, or the judge is going to assume that you're in agreement with it and it's going to be issued, an order will be issued. When you file a motion, you have to send a copy to the other side. If you don't do that, then the court is not going to accept that motion. And then if you don't show up for court, it's very likely that the other side will get whatever they're asking for if you're not there. If you need a date postponed or you need a deadline extended, you need to ask for that promptly. If you're asking for an extension, ask for it before the expiration of the time period. So if it's 2 weeks to file a response, you better ask for an extension within that 2-week period. If the court date is not a convenient date, you need to ask for that continuance, it's called, where you ask the date to be postponed. You need to ask for that in advance. So the court hopes that you'll reach agreement on a parenting plan for your kids. People are often a lot happier with a parenting plan that they've agreed to rather than one that a judge has imposed on them. Because if you can't reach agreement, then you have a hearing. And both sides put on evidence. Both sides say why they're the better parent. That's not something that is going to help your parenting relationship with the other parent. And then you're going to end up with an order that is going to be based on the 4th Judicial District Parenting Guidelines. We have a stack of those in the back. Maybe Christy, if you could pick up the orange colored. They're online, and the guidelines are in the packets. On the bottom of page 22, there's the online reference to how to get those parenting guidelines. But if you have trouble getting them online, you can get them at the Self-Help Center, and you can get them here tonight. But we're going to follow those guidelines, and we're going to try to make a decision based on the children's best interests. And that is something that is really what you would be wanting as well. The problem is we don't know your kids as well as you know your kids. If you two can figure out what's best for your child and write up a parenting plan, maybe with the help of a mediator or a settlement master, and we'll have somebody presenting on those options. There are a couple agencies in town that will help you do that. You're probably going to be happier with that parenting plan, and it may be very similar to what would be ordered by the court. But if somebody orders you to do something, you're going to probably not be as happy with it as something that you came up with and agreed to. And again, I'm not going to know your child as well as you do. I think you're going to be better off with the parenting plan that you come up with. But if you can't reach agreement, the court will have a hearing and will issue a parenting plan. So the settlement conferences are required under the local rules or mediation unless there's a history of power and control or domestic violence in your relationship. If that's the case, then neither one of you is required to participate in a mediation, and you can request that it be waived. There doesn't have to be extreme violence. If there's an imbalance in power in the relationship, then it's unlikely that you're going to be successful in mediating with that person. The mediation process is really an opportunity for the two of you to work cooperatively. It sets the stage for future issues in your parenting relationship that, if you work out the initial plan, probably you're going to be able to work out later parenting conflicts as well. So there's a lot of value in it. But if somebody's objection is to control the other party, then mediation is not going to work. So each person who's presenting will present for about 5 minutes, and then you'll hear from the psychologist on the impact that conflict, when you expose your children to conflict, what that impact is. So the agencies we'll hear from would be the Self-Help Center, and again, that's on page 28. Then we'll hear from Planet Kids, which is a supervised visitation center, and they're on page 32 of the packet. And then Families First is an agency that does parenting consultations that would help you try to reach agreement on a parenting plan, and they're on page 30 of your packet. One agency that helps people figure things out but is not here to present is the Child Support Enforcement Division, and they're on page 29, and some of their contact information is on page 24 in that list of places. But the packet has more information on page 29 about the Child Support Enforcement Division. They can calculate child support for you. And then finally we'll hear from the Community Dispute Resolution Center, which is in your packet on page 34. Again, they do mediations as well. And a reminder that the local parenting guidelines are on the bottom of page 22 in the packet. And then after that at 5 o'clock we'll hear from the psychologist. I'm wondering, does anybody have any questions about the process or what we're doing here tonight? We should be done at 6 o'clock, and when you're done at 6, as the psychologist concludes her presentation, then you'll be free to leave, and the certificates will be turned in to the clerk of court to show you've attended. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Greg Hugh, and I work upstairs at the Missoula Self-Help Law Center. I see a lot of familiar faces here, so I'm sure I've helped out many of you with forms already. But for those who don't know what we do, we're there to provide information to people who don't have an attorney, who are representing themselves. We understand that the legal process can be very difficult and challenging, confusing, and that's where we come in to help you out, help explain all the forms, what you need to do to get your case moving, and really help shed some light on this confusing topic. So we're located upstairs in room 271. You can reach us anytime from Monday through Thursday from 8:30 to 4. We just close for an hour from noon to 1. So if you don't need an appointment, you can come in anytime during those hours. We're happy to help you out. You could also call us. Our information is located on page 28 in that packet. So we should have our phone number in there. We also have some cards in the back of the room. You can send us an email as well. But we're happy to give you the forms you need. We can help explain what these forms are asking for. We'll review the forms, provide you information on the legal process. What we can't do is give you legal advice. So we can't tell you what you should do, how the court's going to decide certain things, and what we would do if we were in your shoes. However, we're happy to help you with all the information possible. So feel free to come on, say hi upstairs in room 271. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Aubrey and I'm the program manager at Planet Kids. I just want to first thank everyone for coming. I know it's a stressful time, so again, thank you for coming. So again, like Amy said, Planet Kids information's on page 32. Feel free to look through now or wait till you get home and look at it. I'm going to be explaining to you what Planet Kids is, the services we offer, and our hours of operation. So Planet Kids provides two services. We provide an on-site supervised visitation, which is on-center, and we also do safe exchanges. We act as a third-party neutral center, which means that we don't choose between sides, and we remain a neutral party by not conducting any evaluations or any kind of recommendations. Before the center can put you on our schedule, we do have to do a registration. Both parties have to register separately. This allows for confidentiality and able to us to remain that third-party neutral basis. There is a $25 registration fee for both parties, and that can be paid at the YWCA in cash or over the phone during our office hours and our times of operation. There is a $5 fee for every visitation, and we usually book out 2 to 4 weeks, so we do ask that you get in sooner rather than later. Planet Kids can be used for any variety of reasons. We can be court-ordered, we can be put in a parenting plan, just individuals that want that kind of third-party neutral location to help out with parenting. So we're currently open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Fridays from 4 to 7, Saturday 12 to 4, and then Sunday 12 to 6. Since we do have limited office open hours, we ask that you call during those times to guarantee a phone call. If you do call during non-office hours, we do ask that you leave a message with your number so we can get back to you as soon as we can. We do hope that we can help you out. Again, our information is on page 32, and thanks for coming.
Hi, I'm Colleen from Families First, the Children's Museum, Missoula, here in downtown Missoula. We offer a variety of supportive services for those that have a relationship and or divorce that is being dissolved. I have a couple things. We do some classes. One of our classes is called a shared parenting class. The shared parenting class cannot be taken by co-parents together, but we offer them 6 times a year, so there's an opportunity if you do need some kind of service as such. Part of it is how to set up another household and take care of your children the best you can, and the other part is communication with your co-parent. It's usually done on 2 evenings, 3 hours each. We have free childcare available if you need it for your children. They get to play in the Children's Museum with a qualified childcare provider. We also have other services that might be of use to do. We have a helpline that you can call. Children get very distressed and very anxious when all this disrupts their little lives, and so if they're having some problems, extra tantrums, bedwetting, teenagers not coming home, all the things that can happen even just normally, but you are already on the edge of not feeling so great, this might be a good place to call and have a 15-minute assurance and help in how to help your child. That is in the packet on page 30. It's free. We call you back in 48 hours. Some of our other services are we offer individualized parenting classes and consults, short-term counseling. Our counseling services are for parenting. And so you may just need once or twice or just a phone call to reassure that everything is going smooth or help you to smooth out what doesn't need to be smoothed out. Actually, we also do parenting plan mediation. We have a little bit of a limited schedule through the summer, but we are open and ready to help you if you have a bump in that in your plan that you need some help getting over. So those are $50 an hour. We have sliding scales. We don't ever turn anybody away. So the parenting class, the shared parenting class is $70, and there is a sliding scale for that. Besides, there is free childcare for your children, so it's a pretty good deal. Our other services that we have is we have a lending library, and of course you always can come up into the Children's Museum with your kids and play with them for a time, maybe when it's a little quieter at your house. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christy Franklin, and I'm on the board of directors over at the Community Dispute Resolution Center. I am also a certified mediator with a family designation, also over at the CDRC, so Community Dispute Resolution Center, CDRC. So when I say CDRC, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. First of all, I also too would like to thank everyone for coming today. I wanted to talk a little bit about what the CDRC does. The CDRC is made up, it's a nonprofit here in Missoula, located over on Liberty Street, right across from McDonald's. We're made up of volunteers. We are all professionally trained. We do parenting plan mediations. We do neighbor-to-neighbor conflict resolution. We also do workplace mediations. So we just provide a wide variety of services. We also do a sliding scale fee for you as well. What we encourage you to do is to do mediations, because as long as you come to the table, then the power will stay with you. And I would like to echo what Standing Master Rubin was saying, in that once it leaves the mediation table and it goes to the judge, then so goes your power as well. So we understand that this is a very difficult process, and what we would like to do is to provide a facilitative, collaborative type of a mediation. So what that means is that we encourage communication between the two parents at the table so that they can serve the best interest of your child. Like I said, the CDRC is located over on Liberty Street. It's in the Homeward Solstice building on the corner of Russell Street and West Broadway. It's at 1535 Liberty Lane, Suite 117A. We're on the bottom floor. So if you go to the right side of the building, then you'll go through the double doors, and that's where we're located at. We do have someone there at the office during the day. Please feel free to call if you have any questions or would like to have a mediation done for you. Like I said, we're all professionally trained, and we're here to help you in any way that we possibly can. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Cindy Miller, and I'll allow you to do your own introduction. So, okay, thanks so much.
Hello everybody, I'm Dr. Cindy Miller. I'm a psychologist in Missoula, and I've been in practice for about 30 years. I do a lot of work with kids and families, and so I have an opportunity to see families in lots of different stages. So certainly I see families that are intact. Moms and dads are living in the same house with their kids. I see families that are in the process of dissolving and parents living in different homes. And I see families that are many years down the road post-divorce. So it's given me an opportunity to get a perspective on what seems to work well for families and what doesn't work so well. When I was first approached about being part of this orientation, I was really excited to be able to be part of this, because I thought this is a great opportunity to be able to talk to parents early on in this process so that you can have some information and hopefully make some good choices about what path you're going to go down. You know, I think of this as, you're kind of at a crossroads and you're making some choices right now about which path to head down. And I think it's a physics principle that once you get movement in one direction, the easiest thing to happen is to continue that movement down that same path. This isn't to say that you can't change paths later, but it's more difficult to change later. So I thought this is a great opportunity to be able to talk to parents early in the process, so hopefully you can make some wise choices about what path you're going down. So that being said, I want to spend some time talking about what we know research shows is the best predictor of how kids do in a divorce situation. Does anybody want to say what they think is the best predictor? You can just say it out loud, call it out. Nobody wants to speak. It's related to what Standing Master Rubin talked about earlier. The level of conflict between parents is the best predictor of how well kids are going to do. And I see some people out there nodding their heads like, yeah, I knew that, I've heard that. So since that's the best predictor, I want to spend some time talking about that, about conflict. You know, I think one way of thinking about this, anything negative one parent says about the other is actually a sideways criticism of the child. Children understand they're a product of both parents. Even very young children get this. They don't understand the genetics behind it, but they understand there's ways I'm like mom and there's ways that I'm like dad. So if one parent is criticizing the other, kids can take that to be a criticism of themselves. And I've heard a number of kids express worry about this, that dad can't stand it, that mom is really emotional. Mom can't stand it that dad is always late. And kids think, I'm that way too. And so if mom didn't like this about dad, is she going to not like that about me as well and not want to be with me? When I was first putting this presentation together, I gave some thought to how I could do a nonverbal presentation as well as just talking, because not everybody learns the best by hearing information. So what I came up with was a felt board, and I've been doing this for quite a while now, this presentation. So when I started, I borrowed my daughter's felt board, and she was a gymnast, and so my little kiddo is a gymnast, and now she's in her second year of college, and so I don't have to share the felt board with her anymore. But you know, just warning you folks, the time goes very, very quickly. Don't squander it. They grow up way too fast. So how I thought about this is, when a parent is being negative about the other parent, in essence, what they're doing is introducing toxic fumes into their child's environment. Now, in a way, this is a metaphor about toxic fumes, but a huge area of research now is about neurobiology. And so what we're coming to understand is it's not just a metaphor. Actually, this is sort of what's happening in reality, that with stress, neurochemicals are released into our bodies and they have physiological effects. With very young children who are exposed to chronic stress, MRIs demonstrate that there are certain areas of their brain that are visibly smaller. And I don't think there's a parent in this room that wants to do that to their child's development, to make areas of their brain actually smaller. So I wanted to spend some time talking about this. But you know, an interesting thing, when I talk with parents who are getting divorced, almost all of them, whether it's in a therapy situation or whether it's in an evaluation, tell me, I know it's a bad thing to talk negatively about the other parent, and I never do that because I know it's harmful to my kids. And then I talk with kids. And I say, so, you know, mom and dad aren't living together anymore. Do they ever say negative things? Do they ever say bad things about the other parent? What do you think kids tell me? Yes, parents are nodding to it. Yeah, kids say, yeah, they talk negatively. You know, one kid's like, duh, they're getting divorced. You know, like, what kind of stupid person are you that my parents are taking me to? Yes, my parents say bad things about each other. So I wonder what's happening here, that parents tell me, no, absolutely not, I'm not doing that. And kids say, yeah, my parents are doing that. Well, I think one thing could be, parents are lying to me, and that could certainly be the case, but I think more often what's true is parents are doing it, and they're not aware that they're doing it. Now, that's a much more dangerous situation, because if you're doing something and you're not aware you're doing it, then you can't stop doing it. So I wanted to spend some time talking about these more subtle ways that parents can introduce toxic fumes into their kids' environment, because it could be that you're doing some of these things and you're not aware of it. Now, I encourage all of you to keep an open mind about this, to not say, oh, I never do that, I never talk bad about the other parent, so I'm going to just tune this lady out until she changes the subject. Because I think we all do this, and I've done it myself. I know better, but I'm not perfect, and I've slipped up sometimes. This is a pretty raw emotional time for people. We're not functioning at our best, so we're going to be even more likely to make mistakes. So I urge each of you to think about what I'm saying and try to figure out what your vulnerabilities are, where you might be likely to slip up. Now, I'll warn you, it's going to be easier to spot what the other parent does and the mistakes that they make, and harder to see this in yourself. And I'm presenting this not for people to get ammunition against the other parent about all the things the other parent is doing wrong. That's not my intent here. My intent is to be for everybody to do some self-reflection and look at how they might slip up sometimes here. So, I'm going to see if I can juggle all of this. I think an obvious way, and what parents are telling me they don't do, is the really blatant stuff, the name calling and overt criticism. That's one way that toxic fumes are introduced. I think a more subtle way is conflict at exchanges. This is a ripe time for there to be conflict when kids are going from one parent to the other. And sometimes parents are trying to work out some changes in the schedule, some swapping one weekend for another weekend. And if you're able to do that, I think that's perfectly fine. But you need to avoid doing that if it tends to not go very smoothly. Because then what I see are kids that dread the exchanges, and they start getting anxious about it because they're worried about what's going to happen this time, how is it going to go this time. And even if the majority of the time it's good, if it's bad, very often at all, kids tend to worry about that. If the level, you know, something that I'm hearing more about now is parents telling me, we don't have conflict at exchanges, we don't talk. Now, kids tell me they hate that. That is weird to them, to have two people that they love probably the most in the world can't even speak to each other. And if you think about really, what's the message in that? If the two of you can't just exchange general civilities, the message is, I think this person is so terrible that I can't even acknowledge their very existence. That's a pretty terrible message. You know, that can be worse than the name calling. So if things are really that terrible that you can't even speak to each other in a civil way, then I think probably it's a good idea to consider using Planet Kids, where you have a neutral exchange where you're not coming face to face. And I'm not saying that you need to be phony and act like you're all buddy-buddy, because kids pick up on that too, and that seems weird. But to just do the, hi, how you doing, kind of thing can make exchanges go much better. So another way toxic fumes are released is parents not saying negative things to the kids, but saying things that kids can overhear. So in talking to other people, talking negatively and kids overhear it. And it's not unusual for me to be talking to a parent on the phone and they're telling me about something that they're angry with the other parent about, and then I hear the child in the background. And I have to say, stop. We need to set a different time where we can talk and your child's not present. And sometimes the parent will say, oh, it's fine, they're watching Barney on TV, they're occupied, they're not listening. I think a good rule of thumb is if your kids are in the house at the same time when you're talking, assume that they hear everything that you're saying. Have you noticed their hearing is better than ours? And they also have radar for this. They just tune right in when there's talk about tension between their parents. So assume if they're in the house, they're hearing what you're saying. Now, it doesn't mean don't talk about things that are bothering you, because you need support, and so certainly do that. Just make sure you're doing it at a time when your kids aren't going to be able to hear what you're saying. Parents sometimes are talking on the phone, and they're not saying the other parent's name, and so they think the kids don't know who they're talking about. And several kids have told me they're insulted by that. They say, I'm not stupid. I know who she's talking about. So just be very careful about that. Another way toxic fumes are introduced is playing the victim. And if you think about this, if you have a victim on one side, what do you have to have on the other side? Anybody? You've got to have a villain, right? You can't have a victim without having a bad guy. So if one parent is playing the victim role, you're implying that the other parent is a villain. And I think people generally don't go around saying, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. It's more subtle than that. So how it can get expressed is things like, honey, I know you need a new backpack. Yours has a hole in it, but you're going to have to make do with your old one because Daddy has all the money and he's using it to buy his new car to drive his new girlfriend around. So you're going to have to make do with your old backpack. That's playing the victim. Now, that might be true. That might be going on. But saying that to the child puts the child in this very difficult position. Because on the one hand, they have a parent who's being victimized, which means they're weak, and then a child can feel like, I need to protect that parent. And they've got a bully for the other parent. That doesn't give them any safe ground. And what I see a lot is that both parents feel like they're a victim. It's a painful process. And my guess is that there's not a person in this room that hasn't felt hurt by the other parent. You're deciding not to be together anymore, and so that probably means things weren't going very well. And there's pain involved in that. So just try to be very careful about that, about playing the victim. It puts kids in a very bad position. So another one is over-reassurance. And I think this is more likely with parents who have young kids. Do any of you have kids like 5 years old and under? Yeah. Where parents are making a big deal about you're going to be okay. So telling the child, okay, you're going to go over to your mom's house now and it's going to be okay. You're going to be just fine. Okay, so here's your phone. Let's practice. 911. And every time when I give this example, people chuckle. Unfortunately, it's an actual example. So you think about what message is getting conveyed to a child in this situation? You're sending me into a situation where you think I might have to call the police? It's going to be that bad? Oh my gosh, this is terrifying. And what are you doing sending me into it if it's that bad? Again, there's no safe place there. So that reassurance isn't actually reassuring. It has the opposite effect. And you know, I think this would be like if you went to a hotel and you're going to check in and they say, it's going to be okay. You're going to have a great time here. You don't have to worry about, there's not going to be bed bugs and nobody's going to break into your room and you don't have to worry about dirt. It's really going to be okay. Do you think, would you feel okay after that? Probably not. You know, all these things that you weren't even thinking about, now they've brought on your radar and it's made you much more anxious. So be careful about that over reassurance. Kids pick up on adults' anxiety. There was a very interesting study that they did in California with moms and babies. So they had the babies in a different room and they put the moms in a stressful situation, which was actually pretty mean. They had to give a presentation to a panel of 5 people who just were blank-faced. And I appreciate you folks aren't doing that to me, that you're giving me some reaction, because it is very stressful to just get these blank faces. And then what they did is the panelists left the room. They bring the baby in with mom, and mom and baby are hooked up so you can measure physiological responses, what's going on in their bodies, so you can see a stress response in the body. One of the panel members walks in. Guess what happens to baby's physiology? Shows stress. Their physiology responds with a stress response. The baby had no negative experience with this panelist, but the mom did. And so the baby picked up on that because when the panelist walked in, mom's body reacted and therefore baby's body reacted. So to realize that, your kids, your nervous systems are communicating directly with your kids' nervous systems. And so if you're anxious, then they're going to be anxious. So trying to be very careful about that, of what kind of anxiety you might be transmitting. And certainly, if it's an unsafe situation, you need to take care of that and make sure they're going into a safe situation. So if there's been history of abuse in the past, that needs to be addressed. But like even if there has been abuse in the past, and so now Planet Kids is going to be used as a safe visitation place, that's safe. And so if that's a situation where your child is going to Planet Kids, you need to get yourself into a place where you can get your anxiety level down and remind yourself they're going into a safe situation. So that can be helpful to kids. Another one that I've started to see more recently. You know, I made extra clouds when I first did this, but now I've been able to fill all of them up because I keep seeing new ways that we can have conflict with parents. I call this one the right to know. Parents telling kids things about the other parent, and they may be things that are actually true, believing that their child has the right to know this about their parent. So saying, my child has the right to know that their dad was having an affair. They should know that. You know, kids figure things out, and they have the right to come to their own understanding of their parents over time. And I guarantee you that they'll figure things out. Do any of you have teenagers?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
My view on that is kids figure things out, and by adolescence, they will have it figured out. If you don't know what your flaws are, when your kids are teenagers, they will be able to itemize them for you, and probably pretty accurately. How I think of this is, it's like parents are parents and kids are cheerleaders, and parents are the base, and kids are the flyers. And I think I'm using those terms correctly. I wasn't a cheerleader, so I'm not for sure. So parents are supporting their kids. When you're in this vulnerable position as a flyer, as a child, and you're relying on this support, it is not very comfortable to have somebody pointing out all the flaws in your base. Even if they might be true, it's already a vulnerable position because parents are splitting up. The family is in disarray. So in this very vulnerable state where you're relying on your base, and to have that being criticized and focusing on the flaws is not helpful to children. They'll figure it out. Let them do that in their time instead of having it rammed down their throat. And sometimes that can backfire in giving kids this information because then kids can get upset with the parent that's giving it to them. They might not at the time, but I've seen this sometimes a few years down the road, and kids being so angry about that. Why did my parent tell me that stuff? I didn't need to know that. They just got me so upset. They pulled me into this battle going on between the two of them. The last one that I wanted to share is that we communicate non-verbally. And actually, communication that is exchanged, well more than 50% of it, probably closer to 90% of it, is nonverbal. And that's what's going to carry more of the message. If there's a contradictory message between words and then what the nonverbal is, we're going to tend to go more with what the nonverbal is. So things like eye rolls, and I would demonstrate, except I can't do it intentionally, but if you have teenagers, you know the eye roll thing. That communicates a lot. So if every time the other parent's name comes up and there's an eye roll, it really says, it's very dismissive. It's kind of a sign of contempt for the other parent. So be careful about those nonverbal kinds of communication that introduce conflict between parents to kids. So like I said, I urge all of you to think about ways in which you might do that without really intending to. So that's, there's a high price to conflict. There's this high emotional price. There's also a very high financial price to it. It costs a lot to be fighting with each other. So when I was first putting this presentation together, I had no idea. I knew it was expensive. I had heard it was expensive to get divorced, but I had no idea. So I called a local attorney to just get some ballpark figures about what the cost is for a divorce. And so what I was told by a local attorney is if there's not any conflict about it and parents are in agreement and you just need some paperwork filed, it costs between $500 to $1,000 per parent to do that paperwork. If it's contested, and so there's a settlement conference, and that Standing Master Rubin was talking about that you need to do in most circumstances before there's a court hearing. If you do that and it settles in that, you're talking about an additional $5,000 per parent. If you're not able to settle in a settlement conference and it has to go to a hearing before a standing master or judge, then you're looking at another $5,000 to $10,000 per parent. I was stunned when I heard those figures. And I'm not bad-mouthing attorneys by any means. I'm just suggesting that you think about, again, ahead of time, the path you're going to go down. And if that's a path that is necessary. Sometimes it is. And I don't mean to be creating shame for anybody that has to go down that route. Sometimes there's just not another way to do it. I'm just suggesting that you think about, for your circumstances, is it necessary? And I think of this for most families that I know, the bulk of the family's financial resources go for support of the children. So the more that's getting drained by attorney's fees and court costs, the less there's available for the kids. And sometimes, I mean, you think about it, you can almost finance a child's college education for what it costs to have this high level of conflict. So to really think about whether it's necessary to do that. What we also know is for folks that have a hearing to decide parenting matters, they're much more likely to end up back in court again. And that makes sense. It's this idea that I was talking about earlier about what path you're going down, and early in the process, if the path that you choose is, we're going to fight about this every time, I'm not going to give an inch, and a judge is going to make the decision, that tends to be the path that continues to get followed. That every time there's a disagreement, it's got to go in front of the judge for a judge to decide. So to really do everything that you can to avoid that situation. We also know that it tends to increase the level of conflict between parents. Court is an adversarial process, so it tends to pit one against the other. So it doesn't have the best impact generally on the co-parenting relationship. And again, sometimes it's the only route and you've got to do that, and so you do that. But if you don't have to, then don't go that way. And as Standing Master Rubin was saying, you folks know your kids better than the judges and standing masters do. So you're better equipped generally to make decisions about what's in your kid's best interest. So, good news here. Who's in charge of what is the best predictor of how well kids are going to adjust to divorce? You guys are. And that's nice. When so much is out of control, it's really nice to have control over this one piece that is going to be the best determinant of how well your kids are going to do. Now, what parents tell me is generally, again, both of them say, I don't want conflict. I would love to have low conflict. It's the other person, and I can't do anything about that. Would any of you be willing to come up here to help me? Thank you. And if you want to just put your stuff down. Okay, can you put your hands up? Okay. Okay, do people see what's happening here? We're locked. Okay, now push against me. Go ahead, push against me. Okay, thank you. You can have a seat. She did the most natural thing, and every time I've done this, this is what happens, that if somebody pushes on us, we push back. And you can get locked into this that can go on forever. When I asked her to push on me and I didn't push back, she had nothing to push on. There was nowhere to go with that. So you don't have control over whether the other parent is going to push or not, whether they're going to introduce conflict. You do, though, have a choice over how you're going to respond to that. Now, I'm not suggesting just be a doormat and give the other person everything they want, let them have all the time with the kids, let them have all the financial resources. By no means am I suggesting that. What I'm saying, though, is if they choose to get ugly, you do not have to get ugly back. That you have that power to say, I'm not going to do that. So if it's in a phone call and the other parent is getting nasty, you can hang up. If there are emails that are getting sent, a lot of people are using our Family Wizard, if that gets very negative, you can just choose to not respond in a negative way. You can be assertive and stand your ground, but you don't have to get aggressive. Does that make sense? Okay. I came across a saying once, long time ago, that I really liked. Staying angry at somebody is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I thought, that's great. That's great. Because we do this, we can get mad, and sometimes we get mad for very good reason, and we can feel very self-righteous in that. And feel like I am never going to let go of my anger about this because I have the right to it. This other person deserves for me to be angry, and I will take it to my grave. And we think we're punishing the other person with that. But like I was talking about earlier, the neurobiology, when we're holding on to that kind of anger, we're dumping all of these stress hormones into our bodies. We're poisoning ourselves. We're not poisoning the other parent. So the sooner we can get past that, like I said, this is a raw time. You don't want to set up camp during this emotionally raw time and say, this is going to be where I'm going to stay stuck. And I've been through a divorce myself. I'm not a Pollyanna about it of, oh, it's all just fine. There's stuff that has to get worked through, so by all means do that. But you can set your sights on trying to move through that as quickly as you can and get to a place of more peace as quickly as possible. You'll benefit from that. Your kids will benefit from that as well. I think a kiddo that I saw summed this up very well. She was in one of these situations that I mentioned when I first started speaking, that it was, like 6-7 years post-divorce, and there had been conflict the whole time. And she said, it's like standing on the sidelines and watching them line up for a collision and knowing it's coming. And to see the pain in her face as she said that, it was just remarkable of just how hard that is. The two people you love most in the world, and you see them and they're lining up and you know what's coming. They're going to do it again. They're going to ram into each other head on, and you're a kid and you can't do anything about it. It's a hard, hard situation. So did anybody not get the message that conflict is not going to be helpful for your kids? So if you don't take anything else with you tonight, if you take that with you, I think it will be helpful for you and your kids. So I want to shift gears now and kind of talk about some other things about kids and divorce. One is that the sooner you can work out a parenting arrangement, the better for the kids. Generally, what they want to know in this is, how does this affect me? What's going to happen in my life? Where am I going to be? So the sooner you can come up with something, and it's fine if it's temporary, and however temporary it needs to be. For the next month, this is going to be what we do. For the next week, this is going to be what we do. Something that's very hard for kids is, they're at school and they don't know who's going to come get me. I don't know, or is nobody going to come get me? It's very distracting to them, and teachers talk about this, that that kids aren't paying attention in class because they're too absorbed with this, if I don't know what's happening and where I'm going to be going. So the sooner you can come up with something, the better for the kids. Something that both of you have to accept is you're going to have less time with the kids. And that is a bitter, bitter pill to swallow. And I think it's one of the most difficult things about divorce for parents and for kids. But the math just doesn't work out that you get to have the same amount of time with your kids. Because before, there was time where both of you were together, and so it added into both of your columns for time with your kids. And now if you're not going to be together, there isn't that. And I see sometimes parents rigidly holding on to what they want in a parenting schedule because they don't want to lose any time with their kids. And it's just a given that that's going to be true. You have to be careful, sometimes parents feel like they need to get the parenting plan changed because their child is saying, I want more time with you. But what they don't realize is that the child is saying the same thing to the other parent, that they want more time with them too. And that it's true, they want more time with both parents. And they can sometimes feel like I'm not getting as much time as I want with either one. And it's reflective of this, if you just have less time together than you used to, and that's tough. In following a parenting plan, you're looking for a balance between structure on one hand and flexibility on the other. So once you come up with a parenting plan, you want to do everything you can to stick to that plan. So schedule things during your own parenting time instead of not paying any attention to it and then having to ask to change the schedule and flop weekends to accommodate it. That being said, life just doesn't lay itself down on the path that we have lined out. Things come up. And so then it's good to have some flexibility to modify the schedule if it's going to be in the kid's best interest. And I think that's a good rule of thumb of looking at, is this in the kid's best interest or not? And if it is, that you agree to that request for a change. I see parents arguing sometimes about this, about, one is on the side of, we can't change anything, it's the parenting plan, this is how we do it, we don't ever make changes. And the other one's saying, oh, we have to be flexible, and they're wanting to change it all the time. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. You need a mixture of both, a balance of both. One time that I think it makes, one situation that I think makes a lot of sense for there to be a change in the schedule is things like extended family reunions. And often with these, a parent doesn't have control over when that is scheduled. And generally it's good for kids to have contact with extended family, assuming of course that they're safe. And the more people in a child's life who love them, the better for the child. So that's a good time to modify the schedule to be able to accommodate that so that the child can attend, rather than a parent rigidly adhering to, no, it's my weekend, and so they're not going to go. Something that I see come up fairly often is kids complaining to one parent about the other parent. And certainly, what I suggest usually is that parents listen to their kids and be, show empathy of, wow, that sounds like that was really tough, that's hard. But then say, but you know what? I can't do anything about that. If you want to change that, you're going to have to talk to the other parent about it. And I think that's a good policy to follow in life in general. If you have a problem with somebody, go directly to that person. Don't talk to everybody else and talk behind the person's back. Go directly to that person to try to get it worked out. Generally, kids don't need to come see a therapist in a divorce situation. I think one time when it can be helpful is if the child doesn't have the kind of relationship with both parents that they feel like they can do that. That if they have an issue with a parent, that they can go to them and tell them that directly and get it worked out. That's a time therapy can be helpful to either help build that kind of relationship if it doesn't exist. Often what I see, it does exist, but kids just don't know it. Kids a lot of times are caretakers and they don't want to upset their parents, so they won't tell them things that are bothering them. So you can be very proactive with your kids, that you can talk with them and let them know, if you have a problem with me, I want to know. Don't worry about hurting my feelings, and I'm not going to be angry with you, but then you have to follow through and not be angry with them if they bring it up, assuming of course that they bring it up in a respectful way instead of screaming and shouting at you. You want to open that door proactively and invite kids to walk through that door and tell you if there's anything that you're doing that's upsetting them, that they feel like they would like to have you do differently. And trying to promote that for them with the other parent as well. And you have to be careful with this. Kids are very, very good at reading parents. And so if they pick up, when I talk to mom about all the fun that I had at dad's house, she doesn't seem to want to hear it. And she'll say, yeah, and then change the subject. But when I complain about dad, then mom's like, oh, really? Really? Tell me more. They pick up on that. Oh, mom likes to hear about bad stuff about dad, but not good stuff. So I'll just tell her the bad stuff. If she likes to hear the bad stuff, maybe I'll just amp it up, turn it up a notch or two and make it sound a little bit worse. So that's something to do, a check with yourself about, of are you communicating that in any way to your child, that you like to hear the bad stuff about the other parent and their time with the other parent more than you like to hear the good stuff. Something I hear a fair amount about are kids having distress at transition times. And that can look different in different kids. So for some kids, that stress looks like they don't listen as well, they're more emotional, they have more meltdowns, they're crying more, they're not eating as well, they have trouble falling asleep. And parents can be quick to jump to the conclusion that obviously means something terrible is going on in the other house, because every time I get them, they seem like they're a mess. Now, certainly, like I said earlier, you want to be alert if there's been any history of abuse in the past or situations that aren't safe. You want to be alert to that and address it immediately. On the other hand, you want to be careful about jumping to the conclusion that that's what's going on. Transition times, it's not unusual for kids to have a lot of problems at those transition times. And the more different the two households are, the more likely you are to have those difficulties. So I think of this as like driving a standard transmission car, and you have to shift from first to second gear. And to do that, you've got to put the clutch in to make that shift. So when kids are transitioning from mom's house to dad's house, or dad's house to mom's house, they're having to make that shift. They're having to put the clutch in, and during that time when the clutch is in, the gears are spinning and not engaged, and that's when you see those problem behaviors popping up. If the households are really different, it's not like shifting from first to second, it's like shifting from first to fourth, or first to fifth, or from fifth gear to reverse sometimes. The more different the households, the bigger that shift is, and the more likely you're going to be to see those transitional problems. So just be careful about how you interpret those. Something to consider is parents who have kids together, you're never really totally separated. And I hear parents say sometimes, you know, I'm kind of stuck with this other person till my kids are 18. It doesn't stop when they're 18, because then you have all of these other things, graduation, marriages, birth of kids, where kids generally would like to have both parents present. And so you end up having to continue to see each other even past the time your kids are 18. Something that I see sometimes is when there's been a lot of conflict between parents, these big markers in kids' lives, like graduations, birthdays, weddings, are stressful for kids. And so rather than it being a time of celebration for them, they're very stressed about, I don't know what my parents are going to do, and and I don't know how to handle this, because after graduation, if I go to mom first, dad's feelings are going to be hurt. If I go to dad first, mom's feelings are going to be hurt. Both of them want to have a party for me at the same time, and I'm caught between them. You don't want that for your kids. That those big moments in their lives have this black cloud over them that really takes a lot of the happiness out of it, and that you're part of that black cloud. So really how your kids are going to be able to do the best is if they have the best relationship possible with both of you. And so really, if you're trying to be the best parent you can be, you don't want to just allow time for your kids to have with the other parent. You want to do what you can to promote that relationship, to help it be the best that it can be. Especially early on, we can get into this sort of competitiveness. We want to be the best parent, we want to be the most liked parent, we want to be the favorite one. You can get kind of into this competitiveness with each other. But really, if you can step back from that and see, my child really is going to be the best, they're going to be able to do the best by having the best relationship with each of us. So I wanted to spend some time now talking about some specific items that you might want to consider including in your parenting plans. So in terms of phone contact, sometimes it works fine to just have a general statement about liberal contact between parents and kids is fine. And everybody's reasonable about that, and it works just fine. Other times it needs to be more specific, and it works better if particular times are outlined, that phone calls will happen on Mondays and Thursdays at 7:00 p.m. But most families, their schedules don't work out that way, that you can always guarantee that everybody's going to be available at 7:00 on those times, and then you run into trouble and people are upset because the phone calls aren't happening. So you want to give some thought to how this is set up. I've seen some parents who felt like they should let their child know that they're thinking about them all the time, and so they felt like they really should call 8, 9, 10 times a day when their child's with the other parent, just to let them know, I miss you and I'm thinking about you. That is way too much. Generally, I think a good rule of thumb is no more than 1 phone call a day. And I'm not saying that there should be 1 phone call a day that you should call every day. For a lot of kids, that's too much and it's too disruptive. But I'm just saying, in general, it shouldn't be more than 1. Except with, sometimes things come up and there needs to be some communication. So I'm also not saying rigidly never more than 1 phone call, but just as some guidance. You need to pay attention to how your kids are doing with the phone calls. A lot of times, what I see, it's an issue for the parents. It's not an issue for the kids, usually. That parents are feeling the need to, I need to talk to my kid, I need to touch base with my kid, rather than kids feeling like, I need to talk to my parent. So you want to see, how are the kids doing after phone calls? Is it working well for them? A lot of times it's great. They talk to the other parent and then they feel wonderful, and looking at also what time of day. So at bedtime, that can be a nice time sometimes. So kids are going to bed and they know the other parent is thinking about them, and so it makes them feel good and they can fall asleep more readily. For other kids, phone calls at bedtime are disastrous. That then they're missing the other parent and they can't fall asleep because now they're reminded of how terrible this divorce is, and they can't be with both parents, and now they can only be with one parent at a time. So phone calls at bedtime might not work well for your kids. So just be attuned to that and don't automatically assume that your kids are loving the phone calls. If you're in one of these situations where the homes are very different, and essentially a child has to be in mom mode at mom's house and in dad mode at dad's house, phone calls can be very stressful for the kids because they can't figure out, what mode am I supposed to be in? I'm at mom's house, and so I'm in mom mode, but dad calls on the phone, and so now I should be in dad mode to talk to dad, but mom's still in the room and they can't figure out how to manage this situation. So just pay attention to that about how your kids are doing with the phone contact. Extracurricular activities. Generally, I think it's a good idea to have some language in your parenting plan along the lines of any activities that affect both parents' time needs to be mutually agreed upon by both parents. And if it only affects one parent's time, then they're free to set up whatever extracurricular activities they want. So if you have language like that and you follow it, it prevents conflict around one parent signing a child up, like for soccer, and then being mad because the other parent isn't taking them to practices or isn't taking them to games. That if you get that figured out on the front end of whether you want your child to be in soccer or not, you can avoid that situation. And that you specify in your parenting plan if there are any activities that you think need both parents' consent, even though it might not affect both parents' time. Some parents say, like for contact sports, that both parents need to agree. So just thinking about things like that. The more specific you can be in your parenting plan, and particularly if it's a high conflict case, the better, because you can iron out those differences at the front end instead of having to fight about them every time when they come up. Getting kids' input in the parenting plan, this is kind of tricky. There's some research that shows that kids having input into a parenting plan have better adjustment to divorce. But I say it's tricky because you don't want them to feel that responsibility on their shoulders that they're having to make that decision. It's far too big of a responsibility and stressful for them. You can, though, ask, like, say, for example, if you've decided we're going to do 50-50, we've agreed on that, you can talk to your kids about different options. So how would you feel if we did 1 week with mom, 1 week with dad? How would you feel if we did Monday and Tuesday with dad, Wednesday and Thursday with mom, and every other weekend we alternate? And kids sometimes have very strong feelings about that, you know, that they can feel like 1 week is way too long to go without seeing a parent. They could feel 2 days here, 2 days there, and 3 days, that's way too much going back and forth. And it just depends on your child. So getting their input on something like that could be very helpful. And making clear to them, you're not asking them to make that decision. The adults will make the decision. We're just interested in what you think about that. One misconception that a lot of people have is that at age 14, kids can choose where they want to live. And I don't know, Standing Master Rubin, do you want to say anything about that, or do you want?
It's just a factor that judges have to take into consideration. I don't know if you want to repeat that.
Yes, Standing Master Rubin said it's just a factor that judges take into consideration. It's not an automatic that they can choose. Because you think about when you were 14 and kids that you know that are 14, how good is their decision making? Yeah, not always the best. More consideration is given to their wishes in recognition of they can consider more factors, and so they're better decision makers than, say, 5-year-olds. But teenagers, if they could just totally make the call themselves, might choose based on who's least likely to recognize if I come home high. Who has more alcohol in their home that I can get access to without them realizing that I'm drinking? Who has fewer chores? Who has a better car that I can drive? So not necessarily the best basis for decisions, and so that's why it's not an automatic thing, but more weight is given when they're 14. Another parenting plan item to consider is right of first refusal. And this is based on the idea that generally it's better for kids to be with a parent rather than being in some third-party care situation. Some words of caution here, and I think it can be a good provision. You have to think about the specifics of your situation. You need to specify a certain time limit, like if a parent can't exercise their parental rights during a 6-hour period, the other parent has first option to have the kids. Or if they can't do it overnight. What you have to be careful about is then that could mean that kids can't do play dates, because first option would have to be given to the other parent first if they wanted to have the child. If you've got grandparents in the area and the kids like to spend the night at the grandparents' house, and you have a provision that says if a parent isn't going to exercise parenting rights overnight, then that could mean that you've got to give the other parent first right before they would stay with their grandparent. So you want to think that through, because you don't want to have a provision that you're going to routinely be ignoring, because that's going to run you into trouble. And you know, there are certainly developmental guidelines, and this was talked about earlier. I think in your packet you've got some information about different developmental considerations. A parenting plan for an infant is likely to look different than for a teenager. There's guidelines that the judges follow in this district for different ages. And again, they're guidelines, they're not absolutes, because individual circumstances sometimes can make a difference. But that can give you some ideas in how you might want to structure parenting plans for whatever ages your kids are. You might want to consider reevaluating in 3 years the parenting plan to see whether it's still fitting your kids' developmental needs. Sometimes that can be good to have that in the parenting plan, that you specify that we'll review this in 3 years. Generally, you don't want to review sooner than that unless there's a particular circumstance that might change, because you don't want to have this unknown of every year we're looking at what's going to happen. And particularly if parents are disagreeing about that a lot, because then you get that people are starting to ramp up for that 6 months before. And so you just don't have any period of very much stability, because you're always thinking about when the plan's going to change next and people kind of positioning for what they think is going to be best. So you want some period like 3 years where things can be settled. Like I said, and again, there's some exceptions if there's something that might be changing that would warrant that, of reevaluating sooner. I think in your packet also are some descriptions of behavior, of problems that kids at different age, how they might manifest difficulties. I think here again, though, you as parents know your kids better than anybody else does, and so these are just general guidelines. And if you have more than one child, you know that they can demonstrate signs of stress differently, that one might get more amped up and the other gets sadder and more withdrawn. So you want to watch for signs that your kids are having difficulty, and certainly talk to them about it. If it's more extreme, seek help. If you're going to seek help for your kids, it's a good idea to let the other parent know and involve them in the process as well. Tends to not go very well if one parent just sets that up without involving the other parent. The other parent feels left out, and then if they have right to decide about that as well, pull the child out of therapy, and it just gets very chaotic for kids. So try to do that, coordinating with the other parent on the front end. We've got about 5 minutes left. Are there any questions that folks have? And I'm going to ask if there are questions that it's about more general things rather than particular situations of I have this particular situation going on, because that's not likely to be as helpful to the group. And if for those particular questions, I'll hang around for a few minutes afterwards and be happy to answer those. Any questions? No? Well, thank you for your attention. You've been a great group, and I hope you have a good evening.